Most people think Stoicism is about not feeling anything, about being cold, about suppressing your emotions and walking through life like a machine. They're wrong, completely wrong. Stoicism isn't about feeling nothing. It's about being controlled by nothing. There's a difference, a massive one. The Stoic doesn't suppress his anger. He understands it and chooses not to be governed by it. The Stoic doesn't deny his fear. He processes it and acts anyway. The Stoic doesn't pretend loss
doesn't hurt. He grieves and continue
functioning. That's not coldness. That's the most sophisticated form of psychological mastery ever developed. And it took the ancient world 5 centuries to build it into a complete system. A system you can learn. A system you can apply starting today. If you want to understand the complete framework for building a Stoic mindset,
Follow us from the ground up. Subscribe and hit
the bell. Because after this video, we're going deep into Amor Fati, the Stoic practice of not just accepting
everything that happens to you, but
loving it completely. But first, how to build a Stoic mindset. The Stoic mindset was not invented by one person. It was built over centuries by some of the most tested human beings who ever lived. Zeno of Citium founded Stoicism in Athens around 300 BC. After losing his entire fortune in a shipwreck, everything he owned gone in a single night at sea, his response was to walk to a bookshop in Athens and begin studying philosophy. He took catastrophe and turned it into the foundation of one of the most enduring philosophical systems in human history. That's not an accident. That's the Stoic mindset. It's the ability to take the worst
thing that happens to you and use it as
raw material for building something greater. Then came Epictetus, born a slave around 50 AD in Hierapolis, beaten so severely by his master that his leg was permanently broken. A man who had no freedom, no property, no rights, no power over his own body, and yet he developed what he called the most radical philosophy of freedom ever articulated. Why? Because he understood something that no amount of external freedom can teach you. The only freedom that matters is internal. The freedom to choose your response. The freedom to choose your character. The freedom to choose what you value. Everything else is noise. Then came Marcus Aurelius, who had the opposite problem. Not a slave, but an emperor, the most powerful man on earth. From 1601 to 180 AD, ruling over 50 million people at the height of Roman power. And his private journals, what we know today as meditations, reveal Zeno,
a man who spent his entire reign
fighting not external enemies but his own mind, fighting the temptation of power, fighting the corruption of
luxury, fighting the softness that
comes from having everything. He used Stoicism as a weapon against his own privilege, and the result was one of the most respected rulers in human history. These 3 men, a shipwrecked merchant, a crippled slave, a divine emperor, all arrived at the same conclusions. That tells you something important. 2. The Stoic mindset isn't circumstantial. It doesn't require specific conditions. It works in poverty. It works in slavery. It works in absolute power. It works anywhere because it operates entirely from within. So what exactly is the Stoic mindset? Let's break it down into its core components, not as abstract philosophy, as a practical operating system for your mind. The first component is the foundational distinction. Everything in your life falls into one of 2 categories. What is within your control and what is not. Epictetus called this the dichotomy of control, and it's the most important idea in all of Stoic philosophy. Within
your control, your judgments, your
desires, your aversions, your will, your effort, your character, your response to events. That's it. Everything else is not your control. Your body, your reputation, your wealth, your health, other people's opinions, other people's actions, the outcome of your work, the economy, the weather, death itself. Most people spend 90% of their
Mental energy on things not in their
control. They're anxious about whether their boss likes them. They're stressed
about what their ex thinks. They're
obsessed with their health outcomes. They're paralyzed by economic news. All of that anxiety is not just unproductive, it's irrational. You cannot control those things. The energy you spend trying is wasted. Worse than wasted. It actively corrupts your peace. The Stoic solution is not indifference, it's precision. You redirect all of that mental energy to the one category you actually control. Your effort, response, your character, your will. You put 100% of your energy into what's yours, and you release everything else. Not because you don't care about outcomes, but because you understand it. That caring about outcomes you can't control is simply suffering voluntarily for no reason. Here's what this looks like practically. You're preparing for a job interview.
A person without Stoic training spent
the night before, anxious about whether
They'll get the job, an outcome they cannot control. A Stoic spends that same energy preparing as thoroughly as possible. Effort they can control completely. The Stoic walks into that interview having done everything within their power. The outcome remains uncertain, but their peace is intact because their peace was never tied to the outcome. It was tied to the effort, and the effort is done.
The second component of the Stoic
Mindset is what Marcus Aurelius called the observer self in Meditations,
written over the last decade of his
reign from around 70 to 180 AD. He returned constantly to the practice of watching his own mind from a slight distance, not being swept away by every thought and emotion, but observing them with what he called the rational faculty. He wrote, "The first rule is to keep an untroubled spirit. The second is to look things in the face and know them for what they are. 2 steps. Stay calm, then look clearly." In that order. Modern psychology calls this metacognition, the ability to think about your own thinking. Neuroscientist
Lisa Feldman Barrett at Northeastern
University has shown in research
published between 2017 and 2022 that
individuals who can accurately label and observe their emotional states show significantly greater emotional regulation, better decision-making under pressure, and lower rates of anxiety and depression. The Stoics called this prosochi, attention to self. They were practicing it 2,000 years before Barrett named the mechanism. The practice is simple but demanding. When an emotion arises, anger, fear, desire, grief, you pause before acting. You observe the emotion. You name it precisely. Not just "I'm upset," but "I'm experiencing anger because I feel my reputation has been threatened." That precision creates distance. Distance creates choice. Choice is freedom. Without that pause, you're purely reactive. You're a biological machine responding to stimuli. With that pause, you're a rational agent choosing your response. That's the entire difference between the Stoic mindset and the default human operating mode. The third component is the training of judgment. The Stoics believe that most human suffering doesn't come from
events themselves, but from our
judgments about events. Marcus Aurelius wrote in Book 6 of Meditations, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment." This is not positive thinking. This is not telling yourself that bad things aren't bad. It's something more precise, recognizing that your assessment of a situation is a choice, and that different assessments lead to radically different emotional consequences. Epictetus gave a clear example in the Discourses, written around 108 AD. Said, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the opinions about things. Business fails. The event is neutral. Your judgment that you're a failure, that your life is ruined, that you'll never recover. Those are additions you
made. They're not the event. They're
your interpretation of the event. They're in your control. An alternative judgment. The business failed. This gives me information about what doesn't work. I'll use it. same event, radically different emotional consequence. That's not denial. That's the deliberate training of judgment. The fourth component is voluntary discomfort. This is where Stoicism separates itself most radically from modern self-improvement culture.
Stoics didn't just think about
Resilience. They trained it deliberately through physical and psychological discomfort. Seneca, in his letters to Lucilius, written in 65 AD, in the last year of his life, before his forced suicide under Nero, described setting aside regular periods of deliberate poverty. He would sleep on a hard surface. He would eat the cheapest food. He would wear rough clothing, not because he was poor. He was enormously wealthy, but because he was inoculating himself against the fear of poverty. He was proving to his own nervous system that poverty was survivable, that comfort was not necessary, that luxury was a preference, not a requirement. This practice has a biological mechanism. Psychologist Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania, in his research published throughout the 1990s and 2000s on learned helplessness and its inverse, learned mastery, showed that organisms exposed to manageable challenges develop greater resilience and confidence in their ability to cope with future challenges. The exposure has to be manageable and graduated. Too much too fast breaks, but regular, deliberate, chosen discomfort builds what Seligman called psychological hardiness. The Stoics called it ease, training. The fifth component is the practice of impermanence. Everything you have is on loan. Your health, your relationships, your possessions, your life itself. The Stoics didn't consider this morbid. They considered it clarifying. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight." When you truly internalize that everything is temporary, too,
things happen simultaneously. First,
your anxiety about losing things decreases dramatically because you've already acknowledged that loss is inevitable and survivable. Second, your
appreciation for what you have
increases dramatically because you understand that it could be gone tomorrow. Seneca described this practice as oi, treating every experience as if it might be the last. He wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life, not to make you depressed, but to make you present, to strip away the casual, distracted relationship most people have with their lives and replace it with something more deliberate, more engaged, more alive." Modern positive psychology researcher Sonia Lubomirsky at UC
Riverside has published research since
2005 showing that gratitude practices, which function similarly to Stoic impermanence meditation, produce measurable increases in well-being, life satisfaction, and psychological resilience. The mechanism is the same, whether you call it Stoic impermanence or gratitude practice. You're training your brain to notice and value what you have rather than taking it for granted. The sixth component is virtue as the only true good. This is perhaps the most radical idea in Stoic philosophy, and the one most foreign to modern culture. The Stoics held that only virtue, specifically the four cardinal virtues of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance, constitutes genuine good. Everything else, wealth, health, reputation, pleasure, even life itself, they classified as preferred indifference. Things that are preferable to their opposites, but not genuinely good in the Stoic sense. Not worth sacrificing virtue to obtain. This sounds extreme until you think about what it actually means. Practically, it means that your
fundamental worth and well-being are
not dependent on external outcomes. You can be genuinely good, genuinely living well, even in poverty, even in illness, even in failure, death, because none of those things touch the only thing that matters: your character, the kind of person you choose to be, your courage, integrity, your wisdom, your justice toward others. These cannot be taken from you by any external force. They can only be surrendered by you. Cato the Younger, who died in 46 BC, rather than accept Julius Caesar's pardon, what the ancients called dying for freedom, embodied this principle. completely. He had lost politically. Caesar had won. Cato could have accepted defeat and lived in comfort under Caesar's rule. Instead, he chose death over compromise of his principles.
Not because he was dramatic, because
he genuinely believed that a life without virtue was not worth living. That's the Stoic position at its most extreme, and it produced one of the most admired deaths in Roman history.
The seventh and final component of the
Stoic mindset is what Epictetus called acting with reservation. This is the practical synthesis of everything else. You set your goals, you make your plans, you commit fully to your effort, but you hold all outcomes loosely, with a mental asterisk. I will do this, unless something prevents me. Not as something prevents me. An excuse, not as an escape from commitment, as a recognition of reality. You cannot guarantee outcomes. You can
Only guarantee your effort and your
character in the process. The reservation protects you from the devastating psychological collapse that comes from treating every setback as a personal failure. The effort was yours. The outcome was never entirely yours. Understanding this distinction is the difference between someone who is broken by failure and someone who learns from it and continues. Now let's talk about how to actually build this mindset. Not as theory, but as a daily practice. Because the Stoics were clear. Philosophy without practice is entertainment. The goal is transformation, not information. Morning practice. Every morning before
you interact with anyone or consume any
content, take 5 minutes for what Epictetus called the morning review. Ask yourself 3 questions. What did I control today? What might challenge my character today? What would a person like a virtue do in the situations I'll face? This is not positive affirmation. This is cognitive preparation. You're priming your rational faculty before the day's events can hijack your emotional reactions. Evening practice. Every evening, take 5 minutes for the Stoic evening review. Ask yourself 3 questions. Where did I lose control of my response today? Where did I let external things
control my peace? What will I do
differently tomorrow? Seneca described
this practice in his letters.
I examine the whole of my day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. This is not self-flagellation. It's honest accounting. You're the auditor of your own character, your own tracking your progress against your own standard. The pause practice. Throughout your day, when any strong emotion arises, anger, fear, desire, resentment, insert a pause before responding. 3 breaths. No more than that. Just enough. Time for your rational faculty to engage before your reactive impulses take over. Marcus Aurelius described this as the critical moment, the gap between stimulus and response. And that gap lies your freedom. Without it, you're a machine. With it, you're a philosopher. The voluntary hardship practice. Once per week, deliberately choose one form of discomfort. A cold shower instead of a warm one. A meal skipped. A night without entertainment. A morning run.
When you don't want to. The specific
discomfort doesn't matter. What matters is that it's chosen, not imposed. You're training your nervous system to distinguish between genuine threat and mere unpleasantness. Most of what breaks people is not actually threatening. It's simply uncomfortable. And once your nervous system learns that uncomfortable is survivable, a massive portion of your anxiety evaporates. The impermanence practice. Once per week, spend 5 minutes deliberately
reflecting on what you might lose.
Not to make yourself anxious, to make yourself grateful and prepared. Your health could fail. The people you love could die. Your financial security could collapse. Your reputation could be destroyed. Not because these things will necessarily happen, but because they could. And the mind that has already walked through that territory is not ambushed by it when it arrives. Here's what the complete Stoic mindset produces over time. You become less reactive, not because you feel less, but because you process faster. You become more decisive, not because you're reckless, but because you're clear about what's in your control and what isn't. You become more resilient, not because life gets easier, but because your capacity to handle difficulty expand. Through deliberate training, you become more present, not because you're unaware of the future, but because your anxiety about it decreases. You become more free, not because your circumstance change, but because your relationship with your circumstances fundamental changes. The Stoic mindset is not a destination. It's a daily practice. Marcus Aurelius didn't achieve Stoicism and stop working. He wrote Meditations, his private philosophical journal, every day of the last decade of his reign. He was fighting his own mind constantly. He was reminding himself constantly of the principles he knew to be true. He was slipping and correcting and slipping and correcting. That's the practice.
Not perfect execution. Consistent with
Return. Epictetus, who had perhaps more reason than any philosopher in history to be bitter and broken, described the complete Stoic goal in a single sentence. In the Discourses, he is a wise man who does not grieve for the things which he has not, but rejoices for those which he has. Not suppress grief, not denying loss, but not being lost, enslaved by it either. Living in the space between fully feeling your experience and being controlled by it. That space is where the Stoic mindset lives, and it's available to you right now, regardless of your circumstances. If this video changed how you see your own mind, good. Subscribe and hit the bell, because next week we're going into Amor Fati, the Stoic practice of not just accepting your fate, but loving it completely. Because once you have a Stoic mindset, the next step isn't just tolerating what happens to you. It's wanting it. It's choosing it. It's loving it entirely. And that is where real power begins. See the game. Control the game.